Joining me now is a gentleman who I have wanted to converse with for some time. This should be a fun one. Let's talk about striking. Let's talk about the future of striking. Let's talk about where it's been and in all its different permutations. And there is no better gentleman to help me with that than the head coach and owner of CSA Gym in Dublin, California. It's Kirian Fitzgibbons. Hi, Kirian. How are you?
Hey, Luke, I'm good. Thank you for having me on the show today. I look forward to talking about all those things and giving my humble opinion on anything and everything that you want to talk about for sure.
Very good. All right. So for folks who obviously you are well known in the industry, but for folks who may not know just yet, I mentioned what you do. You run CSA Gym out in California. Who are some of the fighters over the course of your career that you've worked with, either in Muay Thai or in MMA?
Sure. So I've been very fortunate to work with some amazing athletes through the years, and obviously when we talk about Muay Thai, Kevin Ross, pound for pound, the best American male Thai boxer of all time. I trained Kevin for many years. We won multiple world titles together. Miriam Nakamoto, to this day, pound for pound, the best female Muay Thai fighter of all time, not just American, but in the world. She's in the WBC Hall of Fame, undefeated, 8-time world champion, very first female WBC Muay Thai champion. There was no female Muay Thai champions before Miriam Nakamoto. Kevin, obviously, Gaston Bolaños. I've been training Gaston since he was 14. He's a multiple-time Muay Thai world champion. Eddie Abasolo, Diego Llamas, Zoila Frausto, Ian Escuza, Gabriel Mazzetti, run down the list of a bunch of Muay Thai killers. And then there's a whole batch of new generation that I'm working with Muay Thai as well. MMA, obviously, I'm pretty well known for being, the striking coach for Henry Cejudo on Team Cejudo when he first kind of got in there with the Season of Champions, and then worked with Henry after. So obviously worked with Henry. Alexis Davis got her to the UFC world title fight with Ronda Rousey. Gaston obviously is now in the UFC. All my alpha male guys that I work with, Andre Feely, run down the list, Chris Gonzalez in Bellator. Obviously, I've worked with Josh Emmett. There's so many people that I've worked with. And then obviously Dustin Ortiz, before he retired, fastest knockout in flyweight history. I was with Dustin for many years. I can use my cheat sheet. Matt Schnell, Benito Lopez, obviously, pretty well known now at the moment for working with Jessie Jess before she was left the UFC. So, Kanako Murata. So many, and then obviously work with a lot of other sports as well, straight boxing, regular kickboxing. I'm forgetting people, and I hope I'm not offending anybody, but yeah, I've coached a few people, 25 world champions in 4 different combat sports specific to striking.
All right.
And MMA.
Yeah, very good. Quite the extensive list. All right, so let me open up this conversation if I can, and you tell me where we're at with the growth of MMA striking. We'll move into Muay Thai a little bit later, but let's start with MMA if we can. Are we in a period of technical growth, stagnation, or something else? How would you describe the current state of MMA striking as it relates to how quickly, month over month, year over year, it is improving?
Well, that's a tremendous question in that, as someone who comes from a Muay Thai background, I spend a lot of time watching film. I spend a lot of time studying fighters. I spend a lot of time dealing with all different combat sports. And the striking level in MMA is certainly grown leaps and bounds from where the sport started. The sport is still in its infancy, but what I would say is that it's less about the striking level of MMA as it is the MMA level of world-class strikers. What I mean by this is that unless you are well-versed in grappling, wrestling, offensive, defensive jiu-jitsu, offensive, defensive wrestling, your world-class striking means jack shit in MMA. And the problem is that there are some incredible strikers that never fully embrace the grind of grappling and wrestling. So you see super high level strikers lose often to subpar strikers. The striker in MMA that is the better striker doesn't always win. It's the more effective striker that wins in MMA. So those little gloves are great equalizers. Evasive head movement is one of the more important things for combat sports in MMA than, say, maybe kickboxing or Muay Thai. When you look at like a Gogan Saki, one of the greatest strikers of all time, effectively being retired by Khalil Roundtree off of a lazy inside leg kick that never should have been thrown if you had any respect for the sport of MMA and the person you were fighting. It's very difficult to truly see the highest level of striking in MMA. And obviously, One and Chatri's recent statements about, the striking in the UFC. The UFC is the epitome of MMA right now. It is the top league. It is the end all to be all. It is the best organization. And I love Bellator, and I love One, and I love Ryzen, and I love all organizations. But the top of the food chain is the UFC. And to this day, still, we talk about my guy Gaston. I'll tell you right now, Gaston is one of the best strikers you have had in the history of the UFC. But we're just scratching the surface with him in being able to do what he does in a ring, in the cage, because of all of the other elements of mixed martial arts. When you're talking about the threat of the takedown, the little glove, the threat of submissions, most world-class strikers aren't really willing to dive in, or it takes so long to get good enough to be able to actually open up your striking game. And it's the same with a high-level karate or taekwondo. It doesn't have to be Muay Thai. It could be high-level kickboxing. Look at all of the super pedigrees that have never been in MMA. So, I think that there's plenty of room for growth in the world of striking for MMA, and it's only going to get better. But it's only going to get better when world-class strikers accept and actually embrace the grind of wrestling and grappling and spend time getting comfortable so that they can do all the things that they want to do. Striking is the only component of MMA where the athlete will take tools off the table because they are afraid of the potential negative ramification of said technique. I'm not going to leg kick because if I leg kick too often, I'm going to get taken down. I'm not going to throw body kicks because if I throw the body kick, I'm going to get taken down. I'm not going to do this because if I do this, I'm going to get taken down. The wrestler doesn't take takedowns off of their menu. The grappler doesn't take submissions off of their menu. It's only the striker that severely modifies their game to fit the sport of MMA. And until the strikers can fully open up their arsenal, right? Like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who's had incredible success with his style of striking, which certainly isn't Muay Thai, until you get to that level, or Izzy, and again, I'm a huge fan of Adesanya. He's not the greatest Muay Thai fighter in the history of the UFC. He's not even the best kickboxer in the history of the UFC. He's phenomenal. But still, when you look at his last fight with Sean, the most successful striker, along the lines of Anderson Silva in the modern era of the UFC, was shut down by a sloppy Philly shell, some pressure, and some straight punches. You know what I mean? It's like bad day at the office, or stylistically, because there was enough talk about Sean being a black belt and Sean being able to wrestle that Izzy didn't commit. And Sean's style being as awkward as it is, created Izzy to hesitate. You can question what caused it, but is Sean Strickland going to do that to Izzy in a kickboxing ring? No, not even on a bad day, right? But the threat of the takedown, the threat of the submission, because Izzy is not a black belt and Sean is, changes the entire paradigm of the sport. So striking in MMA, I, as someone who's coached Muay Thai at the highest level, I've coached the U.S. Muay Thai team. I was the head coach for 4 to 5 years. I've been on the board. I train coaches from all over the world. Striking in MMA to this day is something that I spend more time studying and breaking down and figuring out how I can take all of the weapons of Muay Thai, which I feel is the most effective striking art for MMA, and give it to the athletes that I work with so that they're confident in them and not afraid to use them because there's going to be a negative ramification by throwing a kick or throwing an elbow or clinching and using, you know, the Muay Thai clinch to support your wrestling game and kind of marrying it all in. And I think it's where I've had a lot of success as opposed to maybe a traditional Thai that coaches Muay Thai, because if you're not fighting in Lumpini Stadium, they don't really care. So they're not going to spend a lot of time, you know, figuring out why the left body kick isn't happening as much as it should in MMA, or why we're not teeping as much as we should in MMA, you know, or elbowing as much as we should in MMA, because most people don't understand the range of elbowing, right? If we're going to elbow offensively, we need to enter with our boxing. If we're going to elbow defensively, then it's going to be timing and we're not going to reach. These subtle nuances are going to be lost on a lot of coaches. And the coaches that know most of the ties, they don't care about MMA. Now with one and everything else happening, that can change that. But for me, it's really about world-class strikers figuring out how to be better grapplers and better wrestlers so that they can use their world-class striking. And I know that's a long monologue, but I hope that gives you my opinion on that matter to a degree a little bit.
It does, and it certainly illuminates the conversation, but I want to push it a little bit forward in this direction, which is to say, okay, let's and they're all going to be different. I certainly understand that. But let's imagine we have a pool of fighters that you would view and say, okay, these are excellent strikers, world class or not, I don't know, but excellent strikers who have at least done enough to not have to remove so many weapons off the table, and they're really able to thrive and let their game go. The question would be this: are there any common denominators about what those kinds of strikers are doing in MMA, aside from getting the rest of their game solved and good to go, but just on the striking terms, what are they doing to stay ahead? What kinds of techniques or strategies do they employ that you're able to detect that puts them ahead of the curve?
Well, effectively, it really comes down to range management, right? So let's say whether you're a world-class striker or you're an effective striker, the fighter that can dictate the range of the fight, whether that be we want it to be long range so we can use our striking, or we're a grappler and we need to get inside and we need to do that. So the range management is number one. When we talk about the effective strikers that are successful in the UFC and have been successful in the UFC, and again, I know I just said some maybe not so great things about Izzy's performance, but again, huge fan of Izzy. And in general, what he does and has done as a striker in the UFC better than most has been control range. And I feel that now that we're seeing these last few fights where he's spending more time on the fence and less time in the center of the cage, he's having less success. So whether it's just the pressure fighter figuring him out and now is forcing him to fight on the cage. And listen, he's always liked the cage. He's always liked to be an evasive fighter. But if you think about the best Izzy fights, and I'm just using it as an example because that's the casual person that's going to go, okay, great striker. I would use Anderson Silva the same way. When Anderson Silva decided to start playing on the fence, that's kind of when we all kind of went, oh man, Anderson's kind of boring now, versus being in the center of the cage. The striker that is able to dictate and keep that center of the cage and keep the fight at the distance that they want, managing range so that their long range weapons can score. They give themselves time, space, distance in the classic terminology of physics equals power. In fighting, time, space, distance also equals reaction time, also equals visual acuity. And if you give yourself the time, space, and distance to read your opponent and what they're doing, then you're going to have the time to react appropriately, defend the takedown more successfully, evade the strike. The striker that dictates that range and is able to effectively use their fakes, their feints, again, something that Izzy's been great with. And in the last fight, you didn't see much faking and feinting. He was on his back foot the whole time, dictating the center of the cage, controlling range, using your fakes and feints to set up your strikes, establish a weapon, then use that fake or feint to feed the rest of your arsenal. That is going to allow you to have more success in your striking game, especially MMA. So when we're talking about the use of probes, setting traps, cutting people off, knowing these basic things that world-class and highly successful strikers know, and then implementing it in the cage, just the difference between cutting somebody off in the ring and cutting somebody off in the cage is totally different, right? So those are some of the things that are going to allow, when you look at Wonder Boy Thompson, right? So again, I use him as kind of the poster boy of that karate style, right? And I'll use Izzy as the poster boy of the kickboxing style. At their highest success level, you're going to see them controlling range and keeping the fight where their high probability weapons are going to score. And when you talk about your world-class grapplers, the ones that are at their most successful are the ones that are going to get the fight into their range, get the takedown. You could be a great jiu-jitsu player, but if you can't get the takedown, it's not going to help you. You could be a great striker, but if you can't keep standing, it's not going to help you. So for me, the difference in the highest level of striking, whether you're a karate guy, a boxer, a kickboxer, a Muay Thai, or whatever your striking style is your ability to control range through the use of probes, footwork, fakes, feints, setting traps, cutting rings off, evasive footwork where you can move where you need to move, but dictating the center of that cage. The world-class striker does not do well on the fence unless you catch somebody with a big shot. Does that answer the question?
It certainly does, but it leads to many more. So let me follow it up by saying this then. No, that's not quite right. So in terms of broader trends among the better strikers in MMA, the faking, the feinting has been one that I feel like we've been seeing a little bit really since Izzy. I think Izzy and his team have done a great job of, more popularizing it. I'm not saying they were the only team doing it, but certainly making it well known that it was a central feature of their game. Are there other things you can point to in terms of like burgeoning developments, even if they're borrowed from old school sports, but burgeoning developments within MMA striking that is changing it and moving it forward?
Right. Well, I mean, obviously, whether it's really not even burgeoning anymore, but, as a prime example of what you're talking about is a technique that has changed striking to a degree would be the calf kick, right? So not something that you saw in the early ages of the UFC, not something that you saw up until a few years ago. And again, the calf kick is nothing new. It's been utilized in Muay Thai for a long time. The reason it's not so successful in just Muay Thai is just because of the stance and the angle of the leg. But the calf kick would be a perfect example of what you're saying with regards to a technique that's come in. And if you ask Michael Bisping or Daniel Cormier, it's revolutionized striking. But at the end of the day, it certainly has changed the paradigm of how people stand. People learning the importance of checking, the susceptibility to injuries with checking. So that low calf kick, the more people do it, the more chance you have of hurting yourself as well if you don't do it properly. So the calf kick would be one. Obviously, the oblique kick to the knee. Jackson Wing, certainly famous for that. Not a fan of the technique, but it certainly changed Thiago's career plan. So that technique can certainly be utilized effectively. When we talk about something that needs to happen more, we talk about, for me in Muay Thai, the teep should be utilized more often. And I would like to see that trend pick up. Elbows in MMA. It's one of the most effective weapons you have, and we still don't see elbows utilized to the way that we do in Muay Thai with as much grappling that happens in MMA. So I say recently, the calf kick's probably one of the newer developments that certainly has caused problems for people and has kind of changed the game a little bit. It ebbs and flows, right? As you know, you get an emphasis on boxing, and then you bring in some great kickers, and then you bring in some, wrestling is king, and then boxing is king, and then kickboxing is king, and then jiu-jitsu is king. I'd have to look at a breakdown of who the current champions are right now to kind of see, there was a time when everybody was a wrestler, and there was a time when everybody was a black belt, and there was a time when everybody was a striker. For striking, the calf kick would probably be something that, has been a newer trend that people have gotten on that bus and everybody started doing. And it's kind of low hanging fruit and, has its dangers, but certainly, can be effective in changing the paradigm of a fight for sure. Spin kicks still to this day, other than a specialist, you're not getting, really world-class kick game happening in the UFC yet, just because of the threat of balance and takedowns.
One theory I've had, or not even a theory, just a hypothesis, which is I'm trying to figure out like where MMA striking is kind of headed, and it's very, very difficult to figure out. Everyone's going to be different, right? But one thing I've seen among some of the newer, better guys is a renewed focus on not giving up all the portions of their offense, but they are trimming a little bit to be significantly stronger defensively, right? You look at Jack Della Maddalena fighting Kevin Holland, guys who have better footwork, getting in, getting out, better guards, better shells. They are just not as willing to accommodate damage as guys were 5 to 10 years ago. Do you believe that, and doesn't that make sense, right? When people learn a new sport, they traditionally learn offense first, then defense later. It seems like we're getting a broader trend of that, right?
I think that's a great assessment. Absolutely, is that the defensive fundamentals that have started to show in the striking in MMA are levels above where they were just a couple years ago, and a lot of it has to do with kind of figuring out, listen, the longer I stand planted in one spot with these little gloves on, exchanging these volleys with another human being that's trying to hurt me, statistically speaking, when we start throwing these 4 or 5 strike combos and we start to go, that hunter killer mode kicks in and we start to open up. And that's when people are getting caught. Right? When they're lunging, when they're reaching, right? When you look at, Sean and Aljo, Aljo is lunging for that shot, so it's one of those things where I agree 100%. Defensive capability. And what I try to preach in MMA is being offensively minded and defensively sound. Those two go hand in hand. If we only focus on defense, we're going to be behind the 8 ball. Most people in MMA, striking-wise, trend-wise, still don't understand the concept of occupying space, right? 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We've still gained 2 steps, right? 4 steps. Not every strike you throw has to land. This is another problem that a lot of people in MMA understand, that in Muay Thai is not the same issue, or kickboxing. There's a lot of touching and there's a lot of occupying space. If I'm occupying this space and I'm keeping you busy, worried about what I'm doing, you're doing less. And if you're doing less, then I'm getting hit less and I'm hitting you more. So being defensively sound and keeping your combos a little shorter, whereas with kickboxing, in Muay Thai, we'll do longer combos. With MMA, we're going to keep our combos to, 2, 3, 4 strikes at the most, right? And that's mixing punches with kicks with other things, getting in and getting out, right? The science of striking for MMA, right? Controlling range, understanding distance, using your footwork, right? Using your fakes, feints, and your probes to collect data. How are people reacting to the things that you're doing? Then when you do commit to a strike, you commit, defensively sound. When you burst in, your chin is tucked, your hands are up, you bring your feet with you, you don't reach, right? The guys you're talking about are doing these things, right? They're not overcommitting on strikes. They're not opening up their chins as they go in. It's super, super important. And I think that's a very important thing, is that the next phase of striking in MMA, I agree right now, it's not the offense, it's the defense that's improving. So then your people that are usually traditionally highly offensive, they're not scoring the same way, right? And now they've got to adapt their game. So 100%, the defensive mindset of striking in MMA is super important, because I will tell you, listen, I don't think that enough credence is given to the huge difference between the 4-ounce glove and the 8 or 10-ounce glove, right? Just from a defensive structure, how we keep our hands, where we shell, right? We can be lazy with a boxing glove, but if you don't understand that pinky pressure, right, with an MMA glove is the key to not getting your guard separated, you're in trouble, right? So it's about kind of understanding what those little gloves do to us offensively, and just as important, defensively. We're not going to take as many shots on the button with that little glove. So that's why I said evasive head movement is probably more critical in MMA than any other striking sport, right? Shelling up has its place, but the longer we stay shelled, the more we're going to thread that needle, and those little gloves are going to get in and around. So super, super important to be defensively sound. I agree with you 100%. Whereas, Izzy was able to kind of enlighten people with the understanding of setting traps and faking and feinting and all of that. You've got other people right now that are doing a tremendous job in showing the importance of defensive capability, and then capitalize on it. Again, offensively minded, defensively sound. I agree with you 100%.
So here's something that's kind of interesting. I'm going to ask this question in a intentionally loaded way,
Sure.
And you can answer it however it seems to you.
Listen, a lot of people don't like me already. It's okay.
Well, I like you just fine. But the question would be this: why are so many high-level MMA fighters, in this particular case, let's just say UFC fighters, and the ones that traditionally are the ones that may be more known for their striking game, why are so many of them outwardly obsessed with being known as the best boxer in MMA? Why is that?
I think that it falls back on, and I don't want to come off, well, I will, because boxing is easy.
Easy
right?
in what sense?
In that, in MMA, you can throw punches with impunity far easier than you can kicks, elbows, knees, and other things. I love boxing, and boxing is just two weapons, and the term easy isn't a knock on boxing. What I mean is that for MMA, it's the easiest striking implement to start to generate scoring with. It's the first thing you're going to learn. And at the end of the day, boxing is the original striking sport that we all grew up with. It is the original combat sport that, even if you're in the UFC today, when you started it and you started training, boxing was the most popular thing. So being regarded as the best boxer in MMA still kind of holds that same, I'm the best fighter, right? I'm the best boxer, right? Max's desire to prove he's the best boxer in MMA. And at a time he was, right? Not anymore, but at a time he was. And that's the thing, is that, the life cycle of being the best at anything in MMA is short-lived. Tony Ferguson was, pound for pound, one of the best in the world, until one day we all woke up and he wasn't. Right? When did that happen? Right? And Max was the best boxer in MMA until one day he wasn't. When did that happen? Right? The life cycle of an MMA athlete is so short in general. When you talk about somebody like Max, who's had such a long history of success, you really have to applaud him, because if you look at most MMA fighters, their window of being the best version of themselves is this big. And then all of a sudden, and again, I think Conor at one time was pound for pound one of the best fighters in the world. but it's kind of like boxing. When you're an attribute-based fighter, those attributes kind of fade quickly, right? If you look at boxing, and you look at, my favorite boxer of all time, Muhammad Ali, my idol growing up. Was he actually a great boxer? Not really. Fundamentally, he lacked in a lot of areas, right? His charisma, his speed, his attributes, his vision, his timing. These are the things that made him great. Roy Jones Jr., it breaks my heart that most people don't put Roy Jones Jr. on the, Mount Rushmore of the greatest boxers ever. And in his prime, you could not touch Roy Jones Jr. until the attributes started to fade, and then you could touch him pretty easily. And now you've seen him knocked out in Russia. How many times people forget how great Roy Jones Jr. was. Anderson Silva, very much the same way. There was a time when you could not touch Anderson Silva, and the aura of him hitting with you with a jab would knock you out. And then the leg gets broken, and now, we're hanging on the fence. He's getting beat by Michael Bisping and all these other things. When you're an attribute-based fighter, your window of being the very best in the world is short. And boxing, is one of those things where you can be Roy Jones Jr. or you can be Bernard Hopkins and fight into your 50s if you're defensively sound, right? And those attributes are that attribute is learned. It's not something where we get slower. We master the skill. Same with George Foreman, defensively sound later in his career and throughout. So the aura of being the best boxer in the UFC is still tied to, boxing being the primary combat sport that we all grew up with. I certainly want my people to be the best strikers in the UFC. I don't need anyone to be the best boxer, but being the best boxer in the UFC, because there's less risk of getting taken down with all these other things, has been something that people can aspire to and achieve a lot easier than being the best striker in the UFC. Does that make sense?
It sure does. If I may, one thing that I'm just trying to think about in terms of what other coaches, I pick their brains as much as I can. Sure. And sort of one thing I continuously hear from them is a lot of them, this is not in any way like one or two, this must be like a dozen or more, really believe that the future of striking, at least as it pertains to MMA, but I want to pull in some other ones here to get your answer, revolves around the ability to strike equally from both stances. Now, maybe you can tell me what that rule is, or at least what the customs and expectations are in Muay Thai, but you also would know in boxing that you do see some stance switching. Boots Ennis would be a great example. He's a current boxer, one of my favorites, but in general, it is not at all popularized or pushed as like the next gen thing. So I should say, among Muay Thai, boxing, kickboxing, and MMA, why do certain striking sports have such an emphasis on the stance switch and being able to strike from both, and others seemingly actively discourage it?
Well, I think the reason that, and you're right, you find people that are switch hitters in boxing, but it is a severe minority. You find it in Muay Thai, but it is a severe minority, and it's the same with kickboxing. So literally the only combat sport that there's real, true, benefit to switching stances is going to be MMA. And it ties back to the takedown and the wrestler, right? The wrestler being generally right-handed, but standing in that right leg forward stance, so they're closer to get it's somewhat traditional. And then because the fluidity of going from strike to kick to takedown, stance switching lends itself to fluid transitions and chain actions a little more than being tied to just one set stance. I do not believe that people that switch stances are the greatest strikers in the world. You're either a great striker or you're not. Switching stances can confuse your opponent. It can Most people struggle with southpaw. The Cuban boxing team turning everybody southpaw, whether you're a southpaw or not, just because of the tactical advantages of people not being familiar with the stance and the angles and how to circle and how to hand fight and all of that. That comes to play with MMA. And then it also puts you closer for that takedown. When you've got that open stance of your leg closer to their leg than if you're both in orthodox. So those tactical advantages that you can have when you've added wrestling and grappling, absolutely being able to switch stances in MMA is going to give you some tactical capability that you don't have if you don't. So I don't think it's the future of MMA, but I think because MMA is the sport that it is and takedowns are key, switching stances makes that flow with your striking easier at times. So I absolutely have a whole stance switch series that I teach. And, if people aren't comfortable switching stances, I don't ever force it on them. And
Right.
what I will tell you is this, is that I don't let my people stance switch right away. Right. Like Dwayne, everything he does, and again, love him to death. And he certainly had success from day one. All of his people, you do it right-handed, you do it left-handed, you do it right-handed, you do it left-handed, you do it right-handed, you do it left-handed. For me, for world-class striking, I'm going to prefer that someone master their strong side first. Then we'll start to implement stance switch concepts and ideology. But from day one, and again, it's different. I work with a lot of athletes from day one, like Gaston. I started training Gaston when he was 14 years old. He's homegrown. It's one of those things where building somebody up from the day they come in and they throw their first punch. I've seen the challenges that happen when you've got people switching stances early on. So I would prefer that we master our strong side, and then we start to learn how to master the switch stance. So absolutely, for MMA, and it's really the only striking sport where beyond fakes and feints, I'm going to teach my athletes stance switching unless they want to, right? I do believe it's something that you kind of have to be familiar with in MMA, at least just to see it, right? Because it's the only sport where really, if somebody's southpaw, you've got an opportunity to see how they fight orthodox. Whereas in boxing, if you're a southpaw, that fighter's going to spend the majority of their time in southpaw. I could prepare for a southpaw in MMA and get a right-handed fighter for the total of the fight based on how they saw our tape. And no, I'm going to go right-handed because they suffer from this or that, and they're susceptible to the takedown from here. I'm going to go left-handed because it's going to take away, their right body kick, or I'm going to go this way to take away. MMA is really the only sport where that's applicable. So stance switching is certainly important for MMA, but maybe not the future, in my opinion.
Let's talk a little bit about Muay Thai, or at least to start this portion of the conversation, a version of it. Here's what I mean. I'm old and gray. I've been sort of covering the fight game for a long time, and I distinctly recall over the years there's been a number of kickboxing organizations that have tried to pull some of that MMA market share away by explicitly arguing, hey, we don't have any of the wrestling nonsense. I remember Chuck Norris's league was knockouts, not tap outs. They expressly marketed it that way, and it never worked. It never really worked. However, something has kind of clicked with one championship with the 4-ounce Muay Thai, the 4-ounce gloves, in what they would call Muay Thai. Now, I realize it's not actual Muay Thai because they're tinkering with the rules. So whatever it is, how do you feel about it? Because of all the kickboxing things, again, when I say kickboxing, I mean punches and kicks, that have translated to MMA audiences, this might be the biggest of them all.
Oh, for sure. One, the majority of it's happening in a cage, right? So, and they do it in the ring as well. But a good portion of the time they're doing it in the cage, so there's familiarity there. The first time I ever saw it was with John Wayne Park in Australia. He did cage Muay Thai, and that was actually full rules Muay Thai in the cage. But then, what happens then is like, okay, well, for time, so we can get more fighters in, let's go to 3 rounds instead of 5 rounds, which traditional Muay Thai is always 5 rounds, which changes the outcome of a fight. But part of the concept was, well, you don't really need the 5 rounds because in traditional Muay Thai, that first round is a feeling out period to get the betters going. And that fifth round is kind of a, hey, we're going to fight again next week. If you're winning this fight, I'm going to touch your glove and I'm going to accept that I've lost and nothing's going to happen in the fifth round. So it's really rounds 2 to 4 where the good shit happens. So let's make Muay Thai 3 rounds. By making it 3 rounds, we're going to hold the audience's attention more. We're going to fit more fights in. It's more exciting. So that was maybe the first adaptation that I saw that takes it away from traditional Muay Thai. But I absolutely believe that the 1FC model of little gloves for Muay Thai is good for the sport. I don't know if it's, I don't know how it's going to ultimately impact traditional Muay Thai, but they're certainly doing this in Lumpini Stadium now as well with one. So I like it. It gets more exposure. Certainly the little gloves change the dynamic of what you can do in traditional Muay Thai, how long you're going to work your long guard, again, because the little gloves are going to thread the needle through a little more. But because we're dealing with a lot of world-class strikers, high-level Thai people fighting Thai style with little gloves, you're not kind of seeing the brutal, I'm just going to pound on a guy on the ropes because they're all super technical. They've got good defense. You're either getting clipped clean or you're having exciting fights. I like it for sure. Not everybody likes it. I can tell you that there's a movement in Thailand.
Oh yeah.
to get one out of Lumpini and all of that. And
my question is this: is it less technical or is it roughly the same technical?
Right now, it's roughly the same. Right? Will it become less technical? Absolutely. Anytime you put that little glove element in, now there's the chance of getting caught. So people are going to, be more aggressive, or they're going to be less aggressive, and some of the nuances can be lost. But right now, what you're seeing from a world-class Thai fighter fighting a world-class Thai fighter with little gloves is incredibly technical. And I hope it stays that way. I think what you'll see is with one, and I actually watch, the trends in one, the high level matchups, a lot of the time will go to decision or go later in the fight. The lower level matchups where you've got one good guy and one bad guy, those are ending in the first round real quick because those little gloves are totally different than what would happen with a boxing glove. So if you actually watch the trends with one and just, after a one event, go to their Instagram and look at the results, a good chunk of those fights end in the first round. Right? The higher level fights, where 2 good guys and 2 good girls are fighting, those are masterful to see. And that's hopefully what continues on versus, one good guy and then one guy that's there to kind of fill the seats.
Okay, but to what extent is the 4-ounce Muay Thai more or less technical as it stands?
As it stands right now, the level in one, as technical as you're going to get. The level of fighter that is fighting at the highest level in the little glove Muay Thai, best in the world at what they're doing. These are not over the hill guys. Yes, there's some over the hill guys in one, just like there's every other organization. But you've got people in their prime right out of the stadiums that are fighting in the 4-ounce gloves. So you're getting incredibly technical fights. And again, but also just that 4-ounce glove does change a lot of things. I follow a lot of the trends with one, and you can as well, is if you go to their Instagram after one of their events and you look at the fights, those gloved Muay Thai fights, when they're not at the highest level, usually it's going to be a first round blowout. That little glove's making a huge difference. Whereas the bigger glove, somebody could stay in the fight a little bit longer. You get more first round knockouts with one's little glove than you do in Glory's kickboxing across the board. But at the highest level, with 2 talented and expert Muay Thai fighters with little gloves, you're seeing a beautiful thing. And I hope that because it's mixed with MMA and it's mixed with, they just did a boxing fight in one. Did you see that? Wonder Girl lost a boxing fight. And again, world-class Muay Thai female fighter just got outboxed by an MMA girl, right, with little gloves, right? Not being able to clinch, not being able to elbow, not being able to knee really caused Wonder Girl a lot of problems. And in a pure Muay Thai fight, that fight doesn't last very long the other way. But boxing with little gloves, just like bare knuckle boxing, certainly is something that with one's capable. I mean, they're doing grappling fights on cards. I mean, I like one. I don't feel like Chatri feels that it's the number one organization in the world, but at the end of the day, I'm a Muay Thai guy. I've always been a Muay Thai guy, and I'll always be a Muay Thai guy. So anytime that Muay Thai can get coverage and get love, and a fighter can fight a Muay Thai fight and get a $50,000 performance bonus. I mean, Muay Thai fighters do not make much money. So at the end of the day, when that happens, God bless, I'm excited for it. So I hope it continues, and I hope the trend keeps working, and whoever keeps investing in one and whatever keeps that door open, I hope it keeps going, whether it's the Yakuza or whatever gets it done. I hope it keeps going. Because I love Muay Thai, and right now you're seeing some great Muay Thai in one, and there are other great Muay Thai promotions as well. I wish people were more familiar with some of the local promotions here in the U.S. that are putting on tremendous Muay Thai cards. But if one pushes the envelope for the sport, then I'm fully supportive of it as well, for sure.
Let's talk about Muay Thai a little bit here as well, because, back when, let's talk about, I don't know, 2003 or 4, some guys were hiring boxing coaches, but one of the big sort of developments in the aughts was MMA gyms having like a Muay Thai guy, or like a Muay Thai program at a bare minimum. And you still see that, to be clear, like that's definitely still a thing. But Muay Thai is an interesting sport, right? Because it's got the word Thai in it. It's a very traditional sport. It's attached to a lot of cultural customs, even more so than Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is representative of Brazil specifically in that way. And switches, and it has to, wrestling is such a fundamental part of it.
Right.
Muay Thai obviously is not really part of that, even though it's a very effective striking style. So give me a sense, what is the state of the health of Muay Thai, and what is its relationship to MMA?
So with regards to the state of the health of Muay Thai, I think that, globally Muay Thai, so again, just to bring people up to speed, Muay Thai has finally been, and for the last few years, and for people that don't know, I've been involved with USA Muay Thai for a very long time. I coached the US Muay Thai team at the World Championships in 2008. In Korea, 2009, in Thailand, 2010. I was the head coach for about 4 years, and then I was on the board. And getting Muay Thai in the Olympics has been a huge goal of IFMA, which is the International Federation of Muay Thai, and USA Muay Thai, which is the U.S. branch. And finally, over the last year or so, the Muay Thai as a sport, along with kickboxing, has been accepted as an Olympic sport, with regards to being able to be an Olympic sport. No country has picked it up to be in an Olympic yet, but it can be because it's been chosen. So that's a great development. Here in the U.S., Muay Thai has grown so much over the last 10 to 20 years. It's amazing to see where it's at now compared to when I was coaching the U.S. team. There's qualifiers, there's tournaments, the level of Muay Thai. People are winning gold medals at Worlds. In 2022, the U.S. team was ranked #1 at the World Games. That's never happened before. The youth team finishes top 10 every year. We've got kids that are fighting at Worlds, winning gold medals, beating Thailand for the first time. And that's been happening the last 4 or 5 years through USA Muay Thai. It's an incredible movement, and the growth is phenomenal here. So I'm very excited about the future of American Muay Thai and what USA Muay Thai and Mike Corley and that crew is doing with Muay Thai.
And Coach, in terms of the future, in terms of the projects that you're looking forward to potentially even participating in around this area, what would they be?
Well, we're super excited. The Youth World Championships just wrapped up in Turkey, and Team USA ranked number 10 in Worlds this year for the youths. Next March and April, we're going to be doing a youth and adult qualifying tournament in Colorado for USA Muay Thai, which will signify who makes the U.S. team. And then, more importantly, for the first time ever, we are actually going to start running coaching certifications in the U.S. Olympic Training Center because we are now part of the U.S. Olympic Committee. I'll be running those courses as we do them. And the goal is after qualifiers sometime in April or May, we'll start running those coaching certification and coaching qualifiers at the Olympic Training Center. And there's never been a Muay Thai athlete trained at the Olympic Training Center. And that's a huge move and development for U.S. Muay Thai. The fact that this can happen now, and I think the growth of U.S. Muay Thai is going to be even bigger and faster and more explosive with the availability of those resources and those great facilities available to U.S. athletes doing Muay Thai. So I'm tremendously excited about that coming up for USA Muay Thai. Mike Corley, who's the president, has been fantastic, and he continues to make all these things happen for us.
Okay, last one for me. We'll keep you full screen here. If Muay Thai has the kind of growth that you want to see, obviously that will benefit Muay Thai, right?
Yes.
It will be very good for Muay Thai, but it would probably be good for martial arts in general. And so getting back to that original question about getting world-class strikers in MMA, in 10 years, how much closer are we to getting more of those kinds of world-class strikers in MMA if through these composite sports, we have greater growth for their own sake, but for more martial arts beyond it just themselves?
Oh, absolutely. I think one hand feeds the other. The sport is only going to grow. The sport of MMA is its own sport. And again, the best striker in MMA is not the best boxer in boxing, is not the best fighter in Muay Thai. It's the person that learns the entire sport of MMA and then can use all the weapons. But the higher level that Muay Thai is going to get, especially in the U.S., right? Because again, when it comes to MMA, the U.S. does drive this machine right now. The UFC is U.S. based. So as the U.S. Skill goes up, the sport and the technical capabilities are going to go up with it as well. So I see striking in MMA in 10 years looking a lot more like the highest level Muay Thai fight or the highest level karate fight or the highest level boxing fight mixed in with takedowns and submissions and the transitions. I'm tremendously excited about it because, again, MMA being a sport unto itself, it's the most challenging sport that I coach for sure. The toughest sport I coach is Muay Thai. There's nothing tougher on the body than Muay Thai, but the actual art of doing MMA is the toughest sport I've ever been involved in because of everything that you have to learn. So where it's going to go with all of the growth that we're seeing here at a grassroots level with USA Muay Thai, and then the sport itself and everything that the UFC is doing, and now ONE being more involved in building and now coming to the States, I think the level of striking in the next 10 years is just going to explode to the point where, you know, you're going to see such high level transition game between striking to takedown to grappling back. It's exciting for me. Gives me goosebumps.
On that note, we will say thank you, Coach Kirian Fitzgibbons of CSA Gym. We appreciate your time.
Luke, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I'm always available and would love to do it again.